Order the October 14th, 2024 City Council meeting. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
City Clerk Deaton, let the roll call show everyone's present, and we'll move on to approval of the minutes from September 23rd, 2024. Councilmember Bogert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make a motion to accept the minutes as submitted.
A second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Moving on to approval of the bills for this evening. Councilmember Mosier.
I'll move the bills as presented.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you very much. Moving on to approval of the agenda for this evening. Councilmember Dilg.
I'll move the agenda as presented.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. We have nothing on the consent agenda this evening, so we will open the floor for public comment. If you wish to address the council, please remember there's a 2-minute time limit. Please state your name and address for the city clerk.
Good evening. My name is Mary Aola. I live at 416 Washington Street, South Lyon, in the Washington Manor apartment. I would like to ask City Council, the city, if they could decorate the pine tree we have on our complex. We're a low-income senior complex. That's all I really wanted to do, was present that to you. Our manager is Renee. I can't remember her last name. I did bring her phone number, so I could give that to you if you wanted to contact her. Her phone number is 734-575-0744, and she's there on Wednesdays from 10 to 2. But that's basically what I came for, was to see if you could decorate our tree for the holidays. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Seeing none further, we'll close public comment at this point and move on to a discussion of downtown with DDA Director Nate Mack.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Council. Couple of property updates for the downtown. First is for 131 North Lafayette Street, which used to be Coral Sash. There is going to be another clothing boutique going in there called Color It In. They're more of like a formal rental type of place. So they were there previously on a temporary basis, but they've done so well in their location, they've decided to see how it goes for a year. So they'll be there for the next year. I'm sure everybody has seen both the Wellness Strip and Doctors of Physical Therapy has opened at 106 South Lafayette Street, which is the former Draft Street building. Working on getting a ribbon cutting scheduled with the Wellness Strip, potentially for Friday this week, but I've got to double check schedules to make sure everything is good with that, and if there is, I'll let council know so you can attend if you're interested in doing so. We have the Downtown Trick or Treat and Pup Parade, which is going to be happening on Thursday, October 24th from 6 to 8 p.m. The roads are going to be closed downtown from 5 p.m. until 8:30. The Pup Parade will begin at 6:30, and registration will be taking place in the North Farmers Market lot for that. Last week, the DDA board met. And one of the big things that came from the meeting was board members volunteering to help begin to implement different areas of the strategic plan that we have in place. There's 7 different areas that the board identified as things to work on. So we've gotten people to volunteer for each of those areas, and we've begun scheduling meetings to begin to work on that. And then finally, on the electric vehicle charging stations, I've been in touch with State Charging. We've been going back and forth for the last few weeks. They've informed me that DTE is going to be in town tomorrow to go over the two sites that are ready to have the EV charging stations, which is the Well Street parking lot and the Whipple Street parking lot. So they're going to be in town tomorrow, going over those two sites and hopefully getting some sort of timeline on when they'll be able to install those two. The other three locations, we need to do a little bit more work as far as electrical infrastructure, so that's going to be further down the road. So with that, I'll be open to any questions if anybody has any.
Questions for the DDA Director? Councilmember Bogert.
I was at the farmer's market on Saturday and noticed that there were quite a few no-shows. Is any steps being taken to address that?
Yeah, we did talk about that at the DDA board meeting as well on Thursday. Looking at some different ways to make sure that doesn't happen next year, whether that is, I'm trying to remember exactly what it was. Looking at how to, the structure of the fees, there we go. So instead of people getting a discount when they pay up front, potentially if they reach, X number of, 90% of markets or whatever, they'd get a refund at the end of the market season, giving the market manager a little bit more latitude to say, hey, you haven't been here, you're either going to have to pay a greater fee or like a cancellation fee on top of what the vendor fees already were, or you basically can't come back to the market. So, yeah, we've been looking at different markets, what they do, and then trying to come up with the best solution for that. So,
Thank you.
Councilmember Dilg.
Thank you. On the bike racks, so you said that they weren't able to do the bike rack, it looks like a bike, but it said indicated they'll be able to procure others. Is they're just gonna be a regular?
So the ones that Superb Fabricating wasn't able to get are like the decorative, they look like a bicycle. They can't get somebody to make those, so we'll probably just end up ordering those from somewhere online.
Oh, so I'm sorry, so I misread. So not that they're gonna make different ones, you're gonna get those bike ones from somewhere else?
Yep. And then the ones that we can get from them are the inverted U. So that's kind of like that, and then so those are supposed to be the best for bikes, because the other types of bike racks can damage the wheels if they get turned or something like that. If somebody is putting their bike in, like the ones that are kind of wavy, those, when you put your wheel in and either somebody is next to you or if somebody moves your bike, that can bend the front wheel. So we want to avoid that, obviously. So the inverted U is the best way to go.
Okay, so I'm confused. So you're getting it from them then? Not
So we
the-
want to get the inverted U bike racks from them.
Okay,
But the two bicycles, the decorative bicycles, we cannot get from them.
right, but then you were saying you're gonna get it from somewhere else?
Yep.
Okay, so you are getting those. And
Yes.
where are the decorative ones supposed to go?
We're going to have one by the farmer's market, and then I think by Southline Cycle, if I'm remembering correctly.
Did they say when they can do the inverted ones? Like,
They are supposed to be getting back to me hopefully this week on when they're going to get those.
Okay.
So,
thank you.
yep.
Councilmember Hanson.
So regarding the EV chargers, just to confirm, this company is not charging the city anything regarding these chargers, correct? They are handling all the cost.
Correct.
I was speaking with actually someone from the Farmington City Council. Now, Farmington isn't getting any revenue from these chargers. Is there maybe a hang-up because we're getting a portion of the revenue, or we are not getting any revenue per the contract?
No, we are getting revenue per the contract. I believe it's something like 3% or 0.3%, something like that.
Could that be
remember off the
holding
top
up
of my
this
head.
whole process? Because, I mean, a lot of these companies, Ready Charger, ChargePoint, even another company that reached out to me recently, they recoup the expense from the install from just, charging the individual for charging their car. The cities and municipalities are just giving up the space. Is this?
Correct.
It seems like a unique situation that the city is trying to get pennies for, any sort of revenue generated from these chargers, and yet it's causing a hang-up.
So there's been a number of different communities that have entered into the contract, the same contract that we have with Charge EV. They're the ones that proposed the revenue sharing agreement. We didn't ask for that. They said, if you let us install your chargers, we'll give you I can't remember what it is, but it's a pretty small number, based off of, the number of kilowatt hours that are there. I don't think that's holding it up. I think what the holdup is GM saying, sorry, we're not going to provide you with the chargers we said you were going to provide you with anymore. That's been the holdup.
Okay.
So just to clarify, because what you've said contradicts what I've heard regarding these EV chargers. What I heard was, we're trying to cancel the contract because they haven't been responsive when we reached out to them. They haven't replied, that they want to charge us $9,000 to $10,000 a charger to install these things. So can you clarify that for the record, where we stand on the chargers, that they are not going to cost the city a penny, that taxpayers are not paying one bit for these chargers, and there may or may not be some residual amount coming to the city in the same relationship that if we rented space for a vending machine out front, we would recoup.
Okay, so your question is,
I've asked a lot of them there.
you did. So what,
First one is, I heard that we are trying to tank that contract, and they have been unresponsive in replying to us, that we're trying to negate the
yeah, I
contract.
don't know where you
and that we're
heard
gonna-
that.
Okay,
Because we're not trying to do that. This is, it's not going to cost us any money, so.
okay. The next one was that these chargers will not cost the taxpayers of the city of South Lyon one penny for the installation and/or maintenance of these chargers.
Under the current contract, that is correct.
And that's the contract that we're pursuing, correct?
Yes, that's the one we're operating under right now.
Okay. And you say we're gonna get some sort of a minor revenue out of it.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks, Nate. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's right, never mind.
Did you have something? My apologies.
Good.
Moving on to the fire chief's report tonight with Chief Thorrington.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. We are currently at 938 instances, 938 incidents for the year. It's a little behind last year's, but knock on wood, we haven't had any straight line winds or major storms. Hopefully keep on that track. Tyrell Electric has completed the installation of new LED lights in the station. They turned out perfect. We did an engineering and hose advancement training last Tuesday. Our pictures were on Facebook. I don't know if you saw that. We are doing a joint training tomorrow with Ann Arbor Township Fire at Whitmore Lake High School, which is always good. And then we've got a busy couple weeks here with Pub Eds. We've got the Hope Church Trunk or Treat October 19th, the Downtown Kids Trick or Treat October 24th, Sayer Visit, School Visit on the 24th, Sayer Boo Bash on the 25th. We've got the South Lyon Co-op School Visit on the 28th and 29th. And then, of course, Halloween on the 31st, they'll hand out candy. So, and that's all I have.
Gonna be a busy time here.
It is a busy couple weeks.
Any questions for the fire chief? Councilmember Bogert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you remind the community about the medical info packets?
We do have files of life. They're little red files of magnet in the back. You can play your personal information and medical history, put it in a little file where it's not visibly obvious to anybody that comes in your house. Put it in your fridge, and if you have a medical emergency, we'll know where to find your information. They're free. If you're a resident of the city of South Lyon, just give us a call, and we can either drop one off or you can pick one up.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you very much, chief.
Thank you.
Moving on to the police chief report with Chief Bakke this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Council. Just got a couple of things today. We have completed our resurfacing project for our Sally Port, so that's all done. Took a couple of days and a couple of days of drying. We got everything back in with no issue on that. We do have a lien audit coming up on the 17th. That's when the state of Michigan comes in and checks our lien records, our training, and making sure that our computers are all secured. So we've been preparing for that. That happens every 3 years. So that should be, I'm looking at a good outlook on that. We're pretty well prepared for that. We did have a couple of interviews over at the Western Wayne Police Academy over at, in Livonia at Schoolcraft. A couple of other individuals we interviewed. So we're looking at one, if not both of them. One was at the academy. One came in early that day, and he had some prior experience. So we're starting backgrounds on those two. So hopefully they work out. We did complete, and I think it's included in your packet, reference the signage for pedestrians, the warning to look both ways. That is up. So hopefully that'll help with the crosswalks there in the downtown area, especially the one in front of the hotel. So that's up, so just be mindful, everybody, when you make that turn, look both ways for pedestrians going through the crosswalks. That's all I've got for right now. If you got any questions.
Questions for Chief Bakke? Councilmember Dilk?
I just want to say thanks for the signs.
Yeah, no problem. Jeff Archie, he helped out quite a bit on that. I used his expertise on that, so it was a debate on either the bigger or the smaller sign. We got the bigger one, so seems to work there.
No, hopefully it's effective.
Yeah.
Councilmember Bogert?
I noticed a radar sign on 11 Mile. Is
Yeah.
that yours?
Where, we had one up
By the
there.
high school?
Yeah, that should be ours, yes.
Okay.
Yep. They last for about 2 weeks, but they're getting older, so I'm gonna might be investing in new batteries for them, because I think the charge is starting to slow down on those. I think we've had them for, I think 3 or 4 years now, so, but yes, we record all the data, and it'll be up there until the battery dies.
Be interested in the results when it comes down.
I can get those for you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Councilmember Mosier?
Back to the crosswalks again. You know, we have those street signs we put out. Say, the pedestrian ones.
Yes, yes.
Who puts those out for farmer's market? Because they weren't out this last week, and.
We have in the past, because there's another sign there. The one time there was some issues prior to that, so I told our guys, because we have 2 of them.
Right,
But we
right.
use them, we kind of use them for our, if there's issues, we'll put them out, and sometimes just in certain different events. We can put them out again if it's still a problem.
Seems to make a difference. We had an awful lot of close calls this last weekend, and people
Okay.
just are not seeing those yellow flashers, and I think having those pedestrian signs, and we used to have like 6 of them. Did they just get broken, or?
Well, they get run over.
Well, yeah.
And so, that's why we have the lighted signs, but, we could put it out again this, for the next couple of
Yeah, there's
farmers
only
market.
2
Yeah,
left,
yeah,
but
we
it
could do
did
that.
seem to make a difference.
Okay.
And then I was looking at down at the roundabout on 10 Mile there, they have pedestrian lights, but they're like traffic lights that are above.
Okay.
Can we get something like that? That might,
I'd have to talk to Jeff and then, because I talked to Chuck Keller over at TIA for his expertise on signage and what we should have for certain issues, right? I felt that putting the pedestrian sign out there would slow cars down because they don't want to hit the sign, right? So.
right, and it's very
They don't hit it,
noticeable.
so they
That's the
don't wanna
first
miss the
thing I
car.
saw when coming up Whipple, there was that new
Right.
sign. But just having those different, they look like traffic lights, and that might be something that would grab their attention a little bit quicker.
We can talk later, you can send me an email
Yeah.
what you're talking about, I'll be more than happy to
Okay.
take a look at it. It's just, once you start getting more signage and more lights and.
I know.
And we're worried about sign pollution, where there's so many signs and so many inputs of drivers to try to look at everything, sometimes now they're getting distracted on something else, but I can, yes.
Yeah,
I
I just thought it might, because those
Yeah.
lights just, I don't know if they're just not bright enough or they're not attention catching enough.
Well, they can change, I know that Jeff was talking about, they can change the rate of the flashing. They can also change the color, like from yellow to like a more orangish. So I think he's trying to experiment for a little bit
Okay.
different types of colors. But again, it's how many signs do we want up? And
Right.
there's
I get it.
certain plants that are trees that are over the signs, and it's harder
Yeah.
to look at, so it's, again,
It just
I rely
really
on the
brought
ex-
it home this weekend at the farmer's market. It was,
Yeah, we can-
the drivers were getting upset with the pedestrians, even though
The lights are
there's
down.
lights are flashing everywhere, and there was a big dialogue on Facebook, I
We
guess,
can,
about,
we can put that, we'll put that back
yeah,
out there.
just
This,
that pedestrians don't
I'll-
have the right of way, and I'm like, kind of think they do.
yes, they do. They do once they're in the crossing. Yes, you're right. But we can absolutely do that. We can put that sign back up there for last.
That would be great.
Okay, yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Chief Bakke? Thank you very much, Chief.
Thank you.
Tonight, we have the 2023-2024 audit presentation from Plant Moran. Paul, did you want to introduce this at all, or?
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Thanks for having us to present on the results of the audit for the year ended June 30, 2024. So my name is Tim St. Andrew. With me is Philip Femininio. So our plan, you should have all received a copy of the graph presentation. So our plan is to cover the presentation, which includes an executive summary, which is really high-level bullet points of some financial highlights, and then it'll be followed by some financial graphs that cover trend analysis over the last 3 to 5 years, and then we'll end with the required communications that we do have to have with you as the governing body. So before we get into the presentation, I did want to take an opportunity to thank Paul and Patricia and really the entire city team. So we started the audit back in August, and your team was ready to go. We were able to get the audit done effectively, efficiently, on time. It is a lot of work to get through an audit, so I definitely appreciate everyone's help here. So moving on to the executive summary here. So first bullet point, on pages 1 through 3 of the financial statements, you would find our auditor's opinion. And you'll see on the top of page 1 that we did issue an unmodified opinion on the city's financial statements, and that means that the numbers and disclosures are materially accurate and that the users of the financial statements can rely on them. The general fund balance did increase in 2024 by $691,000 from $6.1 million to $6.8 million. Of the $6.8 million of fund balance at year end, $6.4 million was unassigned, which means that it's not restricted or committed for any other specific purpose. The city continued to invest in its infrastructure, spending $9.1 million. Most of that relates to road projects and utility system improvements. As everyone's aware, the city did issue the road improvement bonds last year and received $8.9 million in 2023. So $3.6 million of that was spent, meaning cash out the door. And then there was about $600,000 of additional work performed. That money went out in 2025, the year that we're in now. But at June 30, 2024, there was $4.7 million of bond proceeds left to spend. The capital projects funds had $2.2 million in fund balance at the end of the year. The city paid down debt of $1.6 million. And the water and sewer fund had a net operating loss of $290,000, but that does include a non-cash depreciation expense. So with that, I'll turn it over to Phil to cover the financial graphs.
Thank you, Tim. So the first graph that we like to start off with is looking at your general fund revenue for the past 4 years. And you'll see here that revenue went up about 1.1 million. There's a couple categories that really increased. If you look at fines and fees, that increased. Fines, fees, and others, I should say. That increased to about 500,000, partially due to increase in building permits, and then also included in there is your investment or your interest earnings. So it was a better market year. So higher interest was earned, and so that's really led to that group. And then for your state and federal sources, that went up about 400,000, and that's really recognizing the American Rescue Plan Act funding, some of that revenue. So you would have received that a couple years ago, but as you incur eligible costs, you're able to recognize that revenue. So that revenue is being recognized here. The next slide that we like to do is looking at, just for all the property tax collections, we like to show truly what is collected for the city, and then what the city is really collecting on behalf of all the other taxing authorities. So of the total 22.4 million that was collected, only about 37% of that relates to the city's millages, including any debt service millages in the DDA. And then the rest of that is just collected on behalf of the schools or other taxing authorities. The next slide we have here is looking at your general fund expenditures. So those went down about 1 million. It's important to note last year there was the fire truck. So the fire truck was about 1.5 million that was acquired. So that expense was recognized all of last year. As well, there was actually, due to the timing of the debt service payments, 2 payments last year that were recorded, and then there was nothing this year. So those kind of helped lead to that decrease, and those were offset by mainly, if you look at your recreation and culture, that went up. And that was really just capital improvements for the park systems, such as the Andover Park pedestrian bridge, volunteer and Lafayette Park grading, and certain projects like that. So those expenses will be showing in there, as well as just normal increases from inflation and those costs. The next slide, which Tim handed on a little bit in his executive summary from the fund balance, we like to look at the general fund's fund balance. And really, one of the things we like to do is compare that to your annual expenditures to show if you had no other revenue or no other sources, how much would your unassigned fund balance be able to kind of cover a year's worth of expenditures. So as Tim mentioned, unassigned fund balance did go about 700,000 this year. And as a percentage of your total expenditures, that's 76%, which we would consider to be a healthy fund balance. The next slide is looking at the fund balances for the other governmental funds. We're not going to spend too much time. Really what you'll see in this slide is just for those other funds. They are usually restricted or committed for other sources, so a lot of the roads, a lot of them are committed for the road projects such as the municipal street, the major road, and the local road, just due to the source of the revenue that created those. And then you also have your cemetery fund, which is also restricted, and then the capital projects fund, that's just money that's set aside for certain projects, so you'll see that as showing as committed. And then really what we'd just like to point out here is, as Tim mentioned, you won't really see it in the graph, but the expenses, or the fund balance for the municipal street fund did go from 8.6 to 4.8, just showing that you are working on those projects and continuing to spend that money. The slide that we have showing right now is looking at your water and sewer fund, and what we like to look at here is looking at your operating revenue plus any property taxes that you would have received, and comparing that to your annual expenses. And so we're excluding depreciation as it's not a cash expense. We're kind of trying to get more on that cash basis, and then also including in there any capital improvement costs and debt service. So this year, the revenues were about 5.5 million, and then your expenses were 6.5 million, and that's just purely related to the increase there is just your capital improvements, your utilities fund, as Tim mentioned. Those projects are quite costly, so as you're incurring those, you're going to see those costs kind of increase. And then the last graph that we have, or more table, is the legacy cost. We like to kind of end around here with showing your pension being at about 65% funded. That's up from 61.5% last year. It's due to stronger market performance. For pension, we do like to point out that since this is with MERS, it's based off MERS year end, so MERS is ended at 12/31/2023, so that's your funding percentage as of 12/31/2023. For your OPEB, that is as of 6/30/2024, and so that's up to 51%. And for pension, we do like to just comment, if you were to see MERS valuation, there is slight differences from what we have to report in the financials and what MERS will show as their funded percentage, just due to how MERS accounts for it for determining your future contributions. They do some smoothing, so your gains or losses are kind of allocated over 4 to 5 years, just so that you're not significantly fluctuating your contributions. However, the standards require that for financial statement purposes. It's shown at market, so those significant ups and downs from market performance will be shown every year. So that's why you're going to have a slightly different percent funded. And then for OPEB, the only other thing we like to say is from 4 years ago, your funded percentage was 0. As you've continued to contribute and earn interest on that, you're all the way up to 51%. So we just like to point that out and really show what helping focus and contribute money to that can do, and really get you to 51%, which is above the state's 40% requirement. So now I'll just pass it over to Tim to kind of go through the last end of audit required communication.
Thank you, Phil. All right, so the slide here summarizes the information that is in that end of audit letter that you would have received. And really starting with the bottom here. So no transactions entered into that lacked authoritative guidance. We didn't note any significant transactions recorded in the wrong period. We didn't have any difficulties or disagreements with management. So again, like I mentioned, the audit went really well overall. We did have one finding that we had noted this year that really relates to the city's accounting for capital assets. And because of the ongoing increases in capital expenditure activity at the city here, especially with the road bond proceeds and the road projects, the city did need some help getting some of those entries recorded and making sure that the balances were properly recorded at June 30. I always like to say we're happy to help, and we do this for many communities, but the thresholds and the auditing standards are pretty low, so whenever we do offer any help or identify a journal entry, we do have to report that as a finding. I would say that the capital asset one in particular is one of our more common findings because it is complicated activity to record. especially with road projects that span multiple years. That adds to the complexity. And it is a journal entry that's only done on the full accrual basis of accounting, meaning that the information that gets presented to you monthly or quarterly has been correct. The general fund is fine. This is just the GASB 34 activity, like we like to call it. So now that the audit's over, though, we are going to be coming out and working with Patricia just to provide some extra training and then collectively work through the capital asset work aids that we've been using to figure out if there's a way to simplify them and make sure that for 2025, all of that activity is easily tracked and recorded. With that, I'd be happy to cover any questions you may have.
So questions for the folks from Plymouth, and Councilmember Kurtzwell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to go to your letter dated September 17th, and maybe this is what you are talking about. No, that's something different. Like to talk about sections 1 and 2, include information required to communicate. You observed that the city's internal control on some issues is a material weakness. And what exactly were you referring to in that? Those internal controls, is that with the?
That's the capital asset
That's-
activity. So because the road projects are, we're talking millions of dollars that we helped make sure it was recorded right. It was a material balance, and the wording in the auditing standards is pretty nasty. It's material weakness or significant deficiency, so none of it sounds good, but it was the capital asset activity that that's referring to.
So in your letter then, when you're talking about capital asset workbooks, what exactly is the workbook? Is that the actual journal entry?
It's the workbook is what I'll say summarizes all of the capital expenditure activity, which then is used to generate the journal entry.
Okay, so let me go back a little bit. When we're talking about capital asset activity that triggered your concern, was it specifically related to the journal entries as to road repair, or were there other assets that were not of the city, that were not being properly or whatever entered and accounted for?
So really, there were two significant ones, and they were both road project related. And the issue is really because these span multiple years, when you're reading the pay applications from the contractors, it is tricky to figure out what work was performed last year versus this year, and that's really where we provided our assistance.
So by coming in early this year and assisting, it will prevent a trigger for next year's audit.
It should, yes.
Well, what do you mean it should? I would think that it will.
It should. I can't speak to next year's audit results until because there's always the possibility that we come in and test and find errors. Historically, we haven't had that issue, so I would expect this not to recur.
Okay. And then you talk about, and this issue I've seen before, about the customer deposits payable. And that seems to be a continuing issue. The city should be able to recognize here, it says, a customer deposit payable account, a reconciliation was not able to be completed. Details on that, please?
So I know that the city has been working with, I believe, BSNA and trying to get I'll say an updated customer list, a deposit list, to fully reconcile the payables. And my understanding is that has not been possible yet. And so what we've been able to do, though, for the past few years is annual activity, make sure that the ins and outs are right, but getting a complete reconciliation of the full payable it still appears to be a system constraint at the moment.
Thank you, Council. So the customer cash bond, a lot of the issue is that we have bonds in the general ledger that predate BSNA, that there's no paper tracking. So we don't necessarily know where those funds came from. We can't track them to another party. But I've spent several years, essentially since I almost since I took over this position, because it was during that first audit in 2019 that I was part of. It was recognized as something that we needed to look into. And I've been working with our engineers, HRC, and I've worked with CIB, our planning, to kind of go back and track as much as we can through their papers, and then what I could find within the city for those cash bonds. So this year, we actually did do a significant write-off because of the working with HRC specifically, because we saw a lot of things that were still on the books that we could not, we were not going to be a collect on. So we had a lot of uncollectible monies. But then now the flip side of that is funds that we do have that predate, really going back 2020 or 2006, 2005, where those are housed. Where did those bonds come from? Is there still an active vendor that those need to go back to? Are they projects that never got finished? So that's what we've been trying to figure out, and that's why we are unable to really have a true reconciliation. Because, like Tim mentioned, we can reconcile up to a certain point that I can match those bonds back, but going back beyond our electronic records and then trying to go through paper records to see where those other dollars would be associated with is what has been the issue. So that's why it's taken so long, and we're still in the process of trying to figure that out. But BSNA, I've been trying to work with them on a system. Again, because we don't have the electronic records, they can't create something that we can go back and be able to find those funds that I haven't been able to trace back to. But anything new coming in, we can keep more accurate records of. So that they're able to assist us with within our building department module. But again, the mystery of the history bonds that are out there that we're trying to trace back, that's really what's holding us up with being able to be fully reconciled for the audit each year. So I wouldn't be surprised if next year that's on the audit is, again, unless I'm able to somehow in the next 8 months be able to get this figured out. But it's a project.
Okay, so are we talking about payables?
We are talking about when a developer or a utility company comes in and puts down a cash bond before they start a significant project. That cash bond amount is determined by our engineers and management based on what the project's going to be, what it's going to involve. Then they're told that what the amount is. I'll just use a random number. A lot of times there may be $10,000. They put down the $10,000 bond, and we hold it until the project is 100% completed, certificate of occupancies are filed, the building department, the planning coordinator, and the engineers have signed off on the entire project. Then we can release those funds.
Okay, so are you able to, in terms of researching this, have you been able to go back and find a year in which these are occurring?
No, that's what I'm struggling with, because I can go back to about 2006, maybe a couple into 2005, and then I'm struggling. So I could have something on the books right now, maybe from 99 for all I know. And that's where I'm struggling, is that trying to find what project it was associated with, who put the bond down. A lot of times with some of the older ones that I was able to reconcile, the initial person that put down the bond, they've been bought out 3 times since then. So now it's, they're on the 3rd, 4th company that technically owns that property for what that bond was associated with.
I would think that the corporate minute books would be some assistance in identifying what city council or possibly the planning commission was approving at those periods of time. That's back in the early years.
Yeah.
Of developing in the city.
Yeah.
So that would be, Pulte was here at that time.
Saying, I've gone back through all
Silverman started up in Trotter's Point. That was eventually bought out. You had the developer over at Oak Creek. So if you're moving back before 2005, those were the developers that were in the city that were doing developing, and the corporate minutes, I would think, would at least identify, at least point you to maybe who the developer was. My second point is, and clearly the attorney for the city, I would think that any collection against the city as against these payables, the statute of limitations has run. I mean, I don't think that there's a 20-year statute of limitations on collecting a debt. I mean, if you're holding money, I just, at some point, I don't know why you're not writing it off. What is the amount of money we're talking about?
It's a few $100,000, I believe. I have to look at it, it's just under 200,000. But we did do, like I said, through the last several years, we were able to write off a significant amount that we were able to tie back. And so it's just a matter of finishing up what's left. But I can, again, I can give you guys updates at the next meeting if you would like, what that exact dollar amount is and where we're at, because I've been working on it since the audit as well. So we've had more things matched up. But one thing I have not gone through is the Planning Commission minutes from previous times. So that is something I can look into, because I have not done that.
They approved everything. Okay, thank you. Interesting issue. The next one deals with the coronavirus. You're talking about some options. Could you explain that a little bit in terms of options for the city in terms of reporting?
Well, this relates to really the requirement for a single audit.
Yep.
And so anytime right now under the current rules, if you spend over $750,000 in federal funds, you'd be required to have a single audit performed, which is an audit of the federal awards. To date, you have not spent over that $750,000 threshold, so we have not been subject to a single audit.
Okay. All right, got it. The next question is, there is this thing out there that is effective in 2025, and it's regarding the beneficial ownership information report that entities are required to report to the federal government. If we have a housing commission, is that housing commission required to comply with this reporting requirement? Because it's an entity, it's an ownership entity. Would we be required to do that?
So I'm not sure I have that answer for you tonight, but I can make sure I look into it and get back with you.
Yeah, because that's a federal reporting, and it's clearly for, I mean, I know why it's there, but any entity.
Yeah.
And right now, apparently, the Treasury guidelines are very loose about how to define that entity. So I wonder if a commission would fall in under that, because you do have people in that. The next question that I had, and this goes to our OPEB liability, 384. Thank you for complimenting the city on getting caught up and paying that, because it's, the city obviously didn't follow through and should have done that years ago. So I'm glad to see that the city is making progress towards that liability. You stated that our general fund, we have about 70% covered to pay our bills in the general fund. Did I misunderstand that or get that correct, or?
It's about 70 or 75%, and fund balance is a percentage of current year annual expenditures.
So my question is a little bit theoretical, a little bit academic. At what point does the taxing authority of a community get to a point where the taxing is more than sufficient than what is needed to cover bills, or either you begin paying down maybe some of your debt like this, and maybe a larger chunk, maybe 75,000, 100,000, or you begin dropping your mills? So at what point are you overtaxing?
Yeah.
I mean, 75% is pretty high. Most communities operate around 48, 50%. So I'm not disputing it, because we may have some rough roads again ahead of us. But that's a pretty high general fund. And I'm looking at an OPEB that we have ignored, and personally would like to see a little bit more of a substantial payment on that. Even though the state requires 40%, that's not my issue. My issue is making sure that our responsibilities are funded and paid for. So,
Yeah, and I think that's an exercise that management and council can certainly enter into. So 70% is a healthy fund balance. And we typically say if it's under 30, you might need to start saving a little bit, because we don't know when we're going to hit the next recession, or with inflation and the cost of capital, you don't always want to run out and have to issue debt if you need something. So having those emergency funds is important. It's hard to look at it just at a date and time, because I don't off the top of my head, I don't know what the capital plan looks like. I know you have the roads and we have the capital projects funds, but, you know, that's certainly a piece of it, looking at the 5-year or 10-year capital plan to see will you need to dig into that 70% at all to cover some of those costs. Economic outlook over the next 3 to 5 years, do you think that you'll be able to continue adding to it, or will it decrease like it did 15 years ago? But I think this is a good opportunity to look at it and talk about all of that.
And one last question I had, and that was on the graphs. It was showing the percentage of money that the city retains when it collects its taxes. So the city collects 37%, or retains 37% of all the tax dollars that it collects. When you add up the school districts, and that's all school districts, that's the South Lyon School State Education and Intermediate School District, we are collecting 46% is going to education. Which means that education for the city resident is being funded greater than our responsibilities to the actual residents in the city itself. 46% versus 37% goes to the city. Are these numbers out of whack, or is this pretty common for all communities that their personal operating budget is less than what they are contributing to the schools?
Yeah, this is pretty common. Yeah, usually we see about a third stays with the city.
Okay.
The most goes to the schools, and then you have your, you know, the libraries and authorities that make up the other 20 to 30%.
I just feel bad for the residents. I mean, I think of the parks we could have. You know, that's a lot of money. But anyway, for another day. Okay, thank you. You've been extremely helpful.
Councilmember Mosier.
Can we go back to the cash bonds real quick? Just because I was there when we did that. The city experienced a huge growth back in the 90s, whatnot. And at that point in time, we had our own building department, and they did keep track of the cash bonds. But over time, and we had a different application, I guess you'd call it, fund balance for our general ledger and stuff. When we went to BSNA, when they imported all that information in, they didn't bring the detail. It was just like the dollar amount in those accounts. So we lost a lot of that detail going from fund balance to BSNA. And then we got rid of our building department because the building went down. We had nobody come in for a while. I don't know that anything was ever kept track there. And now we have Safe Built, which with BSNA, they can keep better track and stuff like that. But that's really how that number got the way it got, the way we didn't have the backup or the detail of where the funds came from. And really probably the only way to go through is go through each permit file, and that's just not cost effective to see what permits are still outstanding, because it's $500. I don't know, it might be more now per single family dwelling, and it also depends on the project. And so there's a lot of little detail in there that's just snowballed over the years. It's not anybody's fault really that it happened, but it does need to be taken care of. But that just gives you a little bit of history on it and how it got there.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Kurtzwell.
And I think you're raising a good point. I think the point you're raising is that the historical knowledge, the historical information, to allow her to complete that research probably isn't, she's not going to be able to do it because there have been so many transitions. This was a very small city at the time,
Yeah.
and we've grown. And you become more sophisticated as you get more technological tools, whatever. But at some point, you have to say, enough is enough. We understand we've lost the institutional knowledge. We understand what the dollar amount is. Either write it off or move on with this. I mean, that's just my point.
Right.
You know, at some point, how long are you going to invest city resources in trying to tackle a problem that from a statute of limitations standpoint, I don't see how anybody could sue to recover for that money. I mean, you're almost talking 25 years.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Welcome. Anyone else? So the one question I had was, you've already coordinated with Patricia to work with her on addressing the issue that you did find, is that correct?
Correct.
And when is that scheduled to start?
Well, we haven't scheduled it yet. We talked about it in our end of audit meeting. Once we get the audit report uploaded to the state, then we're going to look probably over the next month, find some dates so we can work on it.
Okay, very good. Certainly appreciate the audit and your efforts in explaining it this evening, and I appreciate you being here.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you. Unfinished business number one, replace the fire station roof with Chief Thorrington this evening.
All right, good evening again. So the agenda topic is replace the fire station roof, contract addendum. The city council approved the original bid by Ferguson Roofing in the amount of $59,100 at the August 26, 2024 council meeting. 2 sections of the roof of the fire station have been completed and appears to be of good quality. Tonight on this agenda is an addendum to Ferguson Roofing contract, the amount of $16,800 to include the area over the fire station kitchen and office areas. And there's an addendum attached. It's got a picture of the station. You can see the 3 gray areas. B and C have been completed, and A is not. Possible courses of action are to approve or not approve the addendum to Ferguson Roofing contract to complete the fire station re-roofing, Section A, in the amount of $16,800 for the account line item 401-451-802-002.
Councilmember Mosier.
I'd like to make the motion to approve the addendum to the Ferguson Roofing contract to complete the fire station re-roofing, Section A, in the amount of $16,800 from account line item 401-451-802-002.
I'll support. Have a motion and a second. Have any further discussion? City Clerk Deaton, if you'll lead us in a roll call vote on this one, please.
Kurzweil,
Yes.
Hibble,
Yes.
Mosier,
Yes.
Dilg,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Bogert,
Yes.
Kennedy.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief. Appreciate it.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Under new business this evening, we have a discussion regarding the South Lyon Cemetery. City Manager Zelnick.
We're in the process of opening a couple new sections in the South Lyon Cemetery, one being Section 11, and also another section is the Columbarium section. This will entail updating the cemetery rules and brochure, planning for future expansion and upgrades in the cemetery's fee schedule. Each single cemetery plot can accommodate 1 burial and 1 cremation, or 4 individual cremations. In the new Columbarium section, each single niche will accommodate 2 cremations. We went out for bid to get information regarding columbariums, and those prices range for a 96 niche structure to be between $25,000 and $75,000. Our recommendation is to change the same fee, or charge the same fee for both the niche within the columbarium or a burial plot within the cemetery. Residential and non-residential rates will still apply to both. We are currently recommending raising the fees for our cemetery plot and for foundations, and I've included the current and proposed fee schedule within this packet as well. We need to raise enough funds through the sale of these plots and niches to maintain a fund balance in the perpetual fund account to help offset some of the maintenance costs and future improvements within the cemetery, which includes repaving of the cemetery, which I've also established some information on that as well tonight. The sales of cemetery plots sales average between about 80% resident and 20% non-resident fees for a plot each year. And the average revenue for the cemetery each year is approximately $50,000. But total expenditures are around $200,000, and that includes burial costs, foundation fees, open and close costs, and cemetery maintenance costs. We currently rely on approximately $50,000 from the perpetual fund each year to offset some of our expenditures for the maintenance and upkeep. The rest of the funding to help pay for the maintenance comes directly out of our general fund. Tonight, we're planning an open discussion on the cemetery to get council's input on improvements to the fee structure. I've included for your review the current year cemetery budget, perpetual budget, cemetery brochure, cemetery rule, cemetery maps and plots, aerial photos of section 10 and 11, cemetery fee schedule, the columbarium information, and cemetery and paving cost estimates. This is the first time we've actually had the opportunity to review everything relating to the cemetery, because we were looking at going for bid, and since we went for bid, coming back before city council to approve those bids. But part of it, accepting those particular bids and part of moving the process forward is to have a full look at everything that has to do with the cemetery. And that's why I provided you all the information today. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have regarding the information that I provided, whether it's proposed cemetery rule changes, costs for the structure, what we're planning on doing. And there's several items within your packet that do describe some of those items that I just mentioned.
Paul, I appreciate you bringing this topic to the council meeting. I'm excited to see the columbarium make the agenda. Brought that to you, it's been a couple of years now, so I'm glad to see that it's finally getting some traction here, and hopefully we can actually make it come to pass, so.
We've had a good opportunity to work with a new employee, Allison, within our office. We have kind of empowered to work on this columbarium and take it with herself and take the opportunity for her to learn about how this whole process works, to get a deep dive into this and get her to understand more and get her an opportunity to learn about how some of the things work within council. So a lot of what I owe to how we got this whole columbarium put together was through our new employee, Allison.
No, that's great to hear. That's great. So, questions from the council for Paul regarding the approach here, regarding the fees, regarding the layout, regarding the addition of the columbarium, and again, some of the other things that you've discussed previously relative to that columbarium is the fact that, it would start with one, it could expand beyond that to a little complex, depending on the demand for it. It could also include an open-air pavilion out there for services and also providing some protection for the visitors from the weather as well in that same section, perhaps. I mean, these are all things that you've discussed previously that we might look at going forward. Is that still on
That's
the
true.
table kind of thing?
A couple years ago, when this was brought up at one of the council budget sessions, we realized there was a lot of things that we needed to do to see where we could put a columbarium and see if it would accommodate that within our cemetery. One was to do soil borings, one was to do analysis of costs, look at how some of the other cemeteries have put columbariums in, what have they done, what do they entail, what are some of the pitfalls, what are some of the, potential good things that we look at putting one in? Because that whole open section on the south side was an area that was deemed to be potentially too wet to put in all new cemetery plots, especially as you get closer south to where the actual creek runs through that area and adjacent to where the schools are. But over the last year and a half, we had the borings done. We did some analysis based upon what potential is for costs for putting in a foundation. Our DPW can put in a foundation for where that is. And not only just, and I gave you, council, a couple of examples of a kind of a rectangular shaped columbarium. Another one was kind of a round or octagon or hexagon shapes that we can place in there. But placing the one section in there to get public interest in it, to put the sidewalk in, to put a little concrete around it. And then if that deems to be a good sale or a good thing that people really want to participate in, instead of putting in actual new burial plots, we could easily expand that and put other sections and kind of put it almost like in a spoke of some sort, other locations. But those designs are, are going to be fluid. We're looking at, like I said, opening up the potential new section this year. And a lot of that was based upon how sales were going to go. Because we had approximately, I think, 25 or 26 lots that were still open there. But then there were some within the last few years that people asked us to hold on because they purchased a cemetery, but they wanted to do two or four more plots that were immediately next to that. We spent an amount of time contacting some of those individuals to see if they're still interested. Some have contacted us and said, no, we're not interested. Some of them have not returned our calls. But we still have time to, we don't necessarily have to open that new section because we still have some plots that are still available within Section 10. The one difference, though, within Section 11 is that one of the things that we've talked about with the maintenance crews and all the other installation was to look at doing flush mounting for one of the sections within the cemetery. Because the amount of time that it takes for the staff at the cemetery to weed whack, to cut, to go around all those things is, every single day they're out there all during the summer. And when you add another section to it and you have to do the weed whacking with upright cemetery markers, it takes more time. So the potential is to have those flush mounts. More cemeteries are going to those. Cemeteries are going to green burials. We haven't really discussed that at all. But I think that's one of the recommendations that you can see within the rules and regulations, that section 11 would be a little bit different. Like I said, and I think in last budget section, one of the council members brought up regarding potential paving of the cemetery. We looked at that also. You can see the cost variances that if you do a chip seal or you do an actually new installation of pavement removal and put all that in. So those are some major expenditures. And you talk about within the audit today that we had, sure, there's a $700,000 perpetual fund. Council used to, or the budgets over the years used to take out about $50,000 a year. But if you keep taking out that same amount, sooner or later, you may be running out of money. So a few years ago, Patricia and I instituted where we're going to take out 7.5% of the unpaid, or of the total fund left in that every single year. So you'll always have money still left in there. But we realize there's still a shortfall. We have to get additional funds in order to keep that perpetual fund, so we're not constantly taking funds out of fund balance to help offset costs for those cemetery plots. But then there's that fine line at what that sweet spot is for what people are willing to pay for a cemetery plot and what's going to be potentially too much. I provided you information there that does show the different, what different municipalities charge for some of those cemetery plots. So you can see the range. We are definitely on the low side. I think it was the last time we raised those prices, I think it was 2017. So it's been quite a few years since we have made a change. So if we are going to make a change, I think what we're proposing is about a 20 or 30% increase for, for this particular year, and then potentially look at what those new costs are going to be. But a lot of the costs have to do with the columbarium, has to do with which columbarium we go with. That wide range of costs has to do with where those columbariums are actually coming from. We received 3 different bids or quotations from companies. One was from Washington, another one I think was from, another one was from Michigan, and there was another location. So we had 3 locations. The one that was outstated, I believe, was from Washington or Oregon, was actually getting that columbarium from China. And I'm not saying that we've ever developed some sort of policy. We say we don't order anything from another foreign country, or we try to do something. We've talked several times about ordering something close to home or within the state. So getting something in state may be a little bit higher, and is it worth that amount to do that? It's something that does have to be considered within this whole conversation.
Questions for Paul regarding the cemetery and the proposals, some feedback for him on the rates and so forth. You're right, on the chart that you gave, we are on the low end there. And obviously, we still have a lot of work that needs to be done in the cemetery, so. Anybody have questions? Councilmember Bogert?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for putting the time and effort into to working on this. The proposed prices, obviously that will offset the expenditures. Will there be a certain margin that would be maintained by using those prices?
We're still losing money when we consider what the cost is. I mean, right now, the open and close costs, basically entails opening, closing, equipment, personnel, putting in topsoil, reseeding it. That fee's about $500. That just covers the cost that we have for open and close for residents right now. We need to establish and make just a little bit of money so we had future maintenance on those plots that we actually sell. So even though we're looking at raising, like I said, the price for plots, 20 or 25%, it does provide us a little bit more funds to work with. From this, we can establish, what the cost of those niches are. And I think, like I said, if we propose that they are the same cost for resident and non-resident rates, that we see how quickly those sell. And if we are in fact going to go, I think, if we decide to stay local, that's the middle price of approximately $50,000 for that columbarium. That will allow us to establish a little bit more funds for the perpetual fund to last each year. And I think we look at that, and if we look at opening that other section perhaps as early as next year or the year after, if we do decide to do flush mounts. If we don't do flush mounts, then, you know, you can hold off on, you know, on opening it right away if you want to, or you can decide if you are gonna do flush mounts, people still have the option to buy, raised, cemetery plots in the section 10, or get the flush mounts, or get the columbarium. We can see how those sales go, and we can see, you know, what other future, plans and how we want to initiate additional columbarium sections, or if we want to raise fees in the future also. It's kind of a big picture when you have to look at it not only from 40,000 feet, but you have to get to each one of these things are going to be a component in how we raise funds or how we maintain that cemetery in the future, especially if you talk about paving it. That does not gonna come out of our road fund. But to have spend $750,000, if we took that out of the perpetual fund, there'd be no money left in perpetual fund. You know, there's some sections there that aren't as bad, like back by section 10 and 11, but the rest of it you can see it's awful. It's over a mile of paving.
Yeah, the fees, the proposed fees are below the average of comparable communities, so, you know, I can't see why there would be an issue with raising our rates, to meet what other communities are doing. And I think it's great to have those options, whether you want a stone or you want, you know, some other option, such as a flesh mount grave or whatever. So, yeah, it's great. Thank you.
So you can decide this year if you want to go right up to that average amount. You know, that would be more like a 30-some% increase perhaps, or closer to 35 or 40% increase. Or you can do the one increase this year and decide to do another increase, you know, the following year.
Thanks.
Councilmember Hanson.
I actually want to agree with Councilmember Bogert, because that was actually a point that I was going to bring up in regards to possibly exploring raising the fees. I mean, we are certainly on the low end, and to recoup some of the costs to pay for some of these improvements, as well as to not keep dipping into the fund balance. I mean, I think that would be definitely something to maybe consider. The question that I also had was, in regards to section 11, I was trying to count on the map, how many plots are actually in section 11?
I believe it's just over 500.
And in regards to section 10, how many plots do we have remaining right now?
We have approximately 25 that are open and another 35 to hold, so we have about 55.
And on average, like, how many plots are sold or
Like
occupied? every
20
year?
to 40 or something every single year based upon, you know, unable to predict.
So we're looking at probably at least sustainable without even the what is it, the non-plot, the columbarium that we're putting in.
Columbarium,
Yeah. Lasting at least 50 to 75 years easily, probably.
Well, if we look, you know, it could be 20, 40, but I think the columbarium, from my understanding from seeing this, is that I think people are gonna go towards that, and I think because that appears to be the way people are moving more towards as far as cremation. If you can get 2 of them in one of those niches, the price point seems to be pretty good. But I think looking at potentially raising it as average, it will help us out. And I think that 500 or so plots, even if we went up to 30 or 40 of those ones in that section every single, yeah, you're right, 15, 20 years. I mean, 20 years, it's going to still be there. So we will not build out. But I think we have a lot of room to expand in that columbarium section to add more if they do sell very well.
Thank you.
Councilmember Mosier.
Just a question on the open and close fees. The open and close for 500 and 800 non-resident, these are full burials, correct? These aren't the,
Correct.
okay. Cremains are a little bit cheaper.
Well, if you're burying a cremain in a burial, like maybe say there were still one plot, they would still be digging down. It wouldn't be the cost wouldn't be as high, but they'd still have to rent the grave. People have to come out there, dig it, install
Right.
it, put it in the proper location. So people
But I
know
know,
there.
like in my case, you're saying, I bought my plot already, and I can put 4 cremains on there. And I think the fee schedule states now, the open and close for those cremains are $150. Has that gone up? Are you gonna revise those as well, I guess is my question?
You said for the cremains?
For cremains, yes.
I have to check on that, Lori, give me a minute.
As opposed to a full burial. I know the full burial, I mean, there's a lot more work involved in a full burial than there is.
Yes,
for
for
cremains.
resident, it's weekdays 150, non-resident, or non-residents 250.
You might want to revisit those costs as well, because it's been 150 for a long time.
Anyone else?
I have a quick question.
Councilmember Doug?
I just wondered this because I really have no idea. Do most cities and townships have and run their own cemeteries and don't have, private ones? Or,
Well, I can tell you out of the 6 communities I work for, half have their own, half don't. Usually the smaller, older towns usually have their own cemeteries.
okay, thank you.
So Paul, are you looking for something in particular from us? I mean,
Well,
it sounds like we've had some discussion about revisiting the rates, if that's accurate, that the council would entertain being in alignment with the surrounding communities, if that's what it's going to take to help maintain the appearance and the upkeep on the cemetery going forward. I mean, it's a city asset, and it means a lot, obviously, to residents and non-residents who have their loved ones buried there. So we certainly want to maintain that going forward. And at the same time, I think it's interesting that we can, if we can pursue and offer the additional opportunity or option of the columbarium as another means in that cemetery, I think that's beneficial, not only to the potential, residents, literally, but also to the city as a whole. I mean, it obviously decreases the amount of real estate that's required for the same number of internments there, and also reduces the amount of maintenance, et cetera. I think it's a good opportunity. It's a good option. So I would definitely like to see the city pursue that. The fact that it offers double occupancy, I'm still trying to, sell my wife on that, but she might have other options, I'm not sure. But I like that opportunity as well, so.
So what I can do then is I will update costs based upon the conversations that council brought up. I'll bring up back information regarding the columbarium. Is council leaning towards going to somebody local for a columbarium from the state of Michigan?
Yes.
I would.
So if that's part of that, then I'll also try to put together some sort of sketch that you can see about potentially what it may look like within the future, kind of adding different areas. How does council feel regarding the flush mounting for section 11?
I have some concerns about that. I actually wish that we would be looking at the ones that aren't developed right now and start planting some trees and things. We have such a beautiful community, and to end up turning it into just essentially a parking lot with grass on it, just so we make it easier on ourselves to maintain it. And I understand that, but if we were to start throwing some trees in right now, you could end up working around it. You might end up losing some plots. Yes, Jesus.
And staff has looked at that. I had the staff look at potential location, how many potential trees we may add there. If you look at section 11, you see trees as you drive up just within the front. What we'd like to do is, yes, plant our own trees, identify the plots within that section, 500-plus sections, for where you're going to put smaller trees that are manageable. Not the jack pine trees that'll grow 75-foot tall that'll be come crashing down at later dates, or
Certainly.
willows or whatever else that was done.
But we know a lot more about that now, so yeah.
Yeah, so doing that was one of the things that would be identified, so I could come back with that also about what you would see there. So you'd see, those particular places where, where those would be on the, in the cemetery plot sections.
I mean, because it loses an awful lot of charm when you just end up looking out at a field. So it'd be very helpful to, in my view at least, to end up seeing some stuff.
Yeah, and when you usually put in a tree, you're probably talking about taking out 2 or 4 spaces of cemetery plots in there, because you're planting them, you'll take up a couple spaces in there where the roots would grow, and some of those trees is gonna kind of take over, so.
At some point, it'll end up being filled, so I'd rather have it be pretty and filled with fewer people than just trying to make the most of how many
Right.
people can we push in there.
The difficult issue that we're also having is people bringing items out there and planning and putting items around there when it clearly states within the cemetery rules. It's very difficult, or it's hard for us as employees to infringe upon somebody's means at which someone pays respects and has done things and put improvements over the years, and to say, no, from now on, you can't do it. But people have put in benches, people have planted bushes, people have planted shrubs without our knowledge. They put in fences there, and it's very difficult. So that's why we want to establish clear rules. It happens, it comes off if it's not within the
think that's
rules.
appropriate, quite
And
honestly, yeah.
that's the way we're trying to work with the new section of that, what that section is. And it still wouldn't prohibit or preclude somebody from making a donation, say, I'd like to donate a bench, and we look at what are the proper locations to put some of those things on, instead of trying to take up, 2 or 3 spaces that end up infringing upon somebody's adjoining plot.
I don't like the idea of a retroactive removing something off of something that's been there for years. But nonetheless, I don't want to end up putting a feeling where people can just bring whatever tchotchke they want to end up doing.
Right.
A design on their loved ones.
And the other
spot.
thing we would do is bring back what Councilman Mosier mentioned regarding the cremation, the burial plot, the new updated price on that also.
So the question for Councilmember Kibble, so when you talk about the field of grass, you're only referring, you don't have you're looking at having the trees and everything to break up the monotony of just a grass parking lot. Are you good with the flush mount of the headstones that he's described, or do you have an input regarding that?
Quite honestly, I think that that's something that, not everybody's going to have the same wallet as the next guy. If you could end up getting a break by having one that was flush and, and you got it, you could end up God dang it, sorry. Interlacing them, some can be up straight ones and.
Yeah, but that's not what he's saying. He's saying that
No, I
entire
know.
section would be.
My personal view would be to end up making it a 3-tier thing, where you got the flush one, the current columbarium, and then the uprights, so.
So if we decide to make section 11, and this is an option, but maybe just kind of clarifying this, is that if you have section 11 being the flush mount and we have the new columbarium section, that still gives 50-plus locations where they can put upright in the current section 10 that are still available for people to buy over a number of years. I mean, I don't know, we may realize this a year or 2 years from now, somebody come in and nobody's buying them because they're flush mounts, and then we have to look at doing a new direction. I mean, that may be something that come in. The staff may get comments from individuals, they make those statements. Or this columbarium section, we may be bringing these things on a yearly basis, I don't know.
But the upright might not end up selling quite as fast because it's just a field. I mean, there's really not an awful lot except for the actual stones themselves. I mean, that's why I think that it's a real good idea to try to get trees in there.
Absolutely.
Any other comments for City Manager Zelnick? Do you have what you need to
Yes, I
take the
do.
next step, Paul? Very good. Thank you very much. Move on to discussion of the budget this evening. Any comments regarding the budget? And we'll move on to public comment. We'll open the floor for public comment. Just please remember the 2-minute time limit. State your name and address for the city clerk. Seeing none, we'll close public comment and move on to the manager's report. So Paul, we're back to you.
A few items, the road improvement projects, Eagle Point subdivision has been completed. They still will be removing the barricades and some of the material that was still left out there. The Brookfield construction continued. They did the base course and they added the top course in certain sections last week, and they still have some repairs and restoration work that needs to be done within that subdivision. I commented to council, gave them information regarding our MMRMA, which is our insurance carrier, based upon the insurance carrier and their board of directors. They voted this distribution of assets this past year, and Southline will be receiving, or has received, $22,342 as part of that distribution. This past week, we had a bid opening for the replacement of boardwalks south of Michigan Seamless Tube. It's going to be on a future agenda. Council right now is researching some materials that the contractor gave as alternatives to ensure that they're proper structure in order to support what our needs are for putting those boardwalk sections in. The Washington Manor, this project is still at a standstill. The applicant is in a holding pattern until they can identify and secure the correct affordable housing funding for the particular project. The road maintenance project, and this is for the 2020 or 2026 Pontiac Trail project. We had a kickoff meeting this past week. We're working with the county as well as our engineer, which happens to also be our city engineer, HRC, develop the total scope of that particular project. We're talking about the public informational meetings, the utility meetings that will take place. We're working and getting them information on our city event calendar, so that will be in the process as well. I know some of the council members have brought up some questions regarding the streetscape project. That potentially, is a budget two cycles from now or 2 budgets from now. But we have informed and have had the conversations with them. The potential is if we are going to do any kind of water or electricity improvements, or if we replace the trees, that's part of that scope of the project. So they're aware that we may be doing some of those things as well. And the last item was the road maintenance project. We held a pre-construction meeting this past week on the preventative maintenance for Wellington, Cummington, and Hearthside. This project will begin within the next couple of weeks and should basically only last a day with no road closures within the subdivision as that project continues. Be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Councilmember Dilg.
Thank you. It's my neighborhood, so people are going to ask me. On the, so the preventative maintenance, what exactly is that going to?
It's basically crack sealing and filling in, the cracks within the street, cleaning them out and putting a hard or the soft tar in there immediately seals up so cars can immediately drive on it.
Is that, in the plan, is that all that will happen in that area?
For right now, but we're also looking at adding additional areas if this contractor does a good job that we expand to do more within the spring.
Okay,
We haven't used this contractor in the past on the project, but that's how, looking at some of these things, we would extend the contract, just like kind of we did with the sidewalk program. They were good contractors to work with. They got things done in a timely manner. They were effective within the price. They got done what they said they were going to get done. Potential is to look at potentially doing more within the spring and continuing, because it's part of our road improvement project, not only repaving the roads, but also crack sealing and preventive maintenance to get existing roads to last longer.
What I was meaning is, sorry, my voice is squeaky today, is in the bond program, is that the only thing that'll be happening in there? Like, these roads won't get anything else?
Not for the foreseeable future, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? So Paul, I looked at, the Oakland County 2024-2026 transportation plan, and we made the plan. It shows Pontiac Trail is going to be addressed, but it shows it being addressed only from the railroad tracks to the Yerkes Drain, not to 9 Mile. Now, we've talked about this several times. You've made the statement that it's going to 9 Mile. Is it indeed going to go to 9 Mile?
Yes, it is. Originally, we talked that it was going to be from Yerkes Drain to the railroad tracks. Then it expanded to 9 Mile. The county was all for it. Then the county informed us, well, we don't necessarily have all the funds for that. So we started to research additional funds, and we received additional federal funds to go all the way to 9 Mile. So right now, that is the scope, from the railroad tracks to 9 Mile. Basically, the repaving is from the Yerkes Drain to 9 Mile, but the drain work and repaving is from the railroad tracks to the Yerkes Drain.
Okay. It also shows that where you have the 600,000 in there for the traffic signal updates at the 3 intersections on Pontiac Trail. So is that going to be addressed as part of that Pontiac Trail project?
That's
or
gonna be part of the
At least
project.
prep for it or whatever?
Yep, that's relocating the poles. When we had the meeting last week, we also talked about the potential for the expansion of McCaddy Park, having the Reynolds Suite potential right away, where that may come through as a future entrance. So that goes into the design as well. Looking at the potential for installing new water main in front of where the churches are, where the old cast iron water main is. It's about 1,200 feet of pipe. I mean, there's so many little things and, nuances that are part of this project, but we start to just have that discussion. They develop the scope and the plan, because they just finished the final portion of the survey from the Yerkes Drain down to 9 Mile within the past month to add this whole thing. But it's still a design concept on how deep that is and how that's going to be affected by other utilities. The water main, the sanitary sewer, if the gas company decides they want to put a new gas line in there at that particular time, the electrical company, if they want to do things, taps, all the different things. So it's a huge project, and it's
Oh,
a
there's
huge
no doubt about it, and I'm delighted to hear that we're looking at repairing that water line, because, we've had so many breaks on that line. I mean, it's Band-Aid after Band-Aid on that thing, right across in front of St. Joseph Church there and everything.
And I think we've had 6 breaks in the last 5 years on that. And the thing is that water line is actually out of the realm or the scope of the project, because that is beyond the Yerkes Drain, and it's beyond the scope of just where the repaving was taking place. But if we are doing other utility work, this is the time to get it done with the contractor doing other water main. If we have any sanitary sewer improvements, we have taps that need to be done or whatever it may be, to bid this out, and that's just our contributing portion. It's no funds from the feds or the county to do that.
Yeah, and you mentioned the streetscape. Obviously, we're not going to try to do the streetscape while we're doing the Pontiac Trail thing.
Well-
But if there's prep steps that we can undertake while we're there, obviously it would be beneficial. So if it's a matter of, having a sleeve or conduit, to extend the electricity from one side to the other, it's in, so that when the time comes, we're not tearing up the road or boring the road in order to do those things.
Right, and the DDA director and I and the engineer have been having conversations for the last couple of years, what a potential project would look like. What if we decide to do all these things, what is it going to cost? How is it going to impact the downtown? Because basically this project right now is curb to curb. That means from the back of curb to the back of curb. Nothing underneath where any of the brick pavers are or anything like that. But if we're doing some utility work and we can install a 2-inch water line and another conduit where electrical work is right on the edge or right at that location where they're doing the other work, let's get it done there. And so when we want to do that and we rip up trees, we can tap immediately into that and get that stuff done. Just like how the storm sewer is technically only the corridor of Pontiac Trail. But if we have any improvements on side streets, Liberty Street, on 10 Mile Road, or on McCaddy or Dorothy or whatever it may be at any locations, we're prepared for that, so we can tap into that at a future date. But it has to meet certain design for runoff coefficients and, what the potential capacity is for that particular pipe. But there's just so much to consider in this, and whether we can do it. And I can't come to council right now saying, council, are you going to approve something 2 years from now in the budget to redo the streetscape project? But they're at least cognizant that we are going to potentially do this and what would need it to be done. So that's why we have those early conversations.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Any other questions for Paul? Thanks, Paul. Certainly appreciate the update on that. Move on to council comments this evening, and we'll start off with Councilmember Kurtzwell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I would like to thank Beckway Doors. They were at my house on last Monday installing new garage doors, and this has been a continuing project over at my house. They did a great job. They were very prompt. They were incredibly helpful in picking out a design, the technology that they used to help assist us on picking a color and a design. They were able to Photoshop it into an actual photograph of our house. The salesman, Nick, was just wonderful. And, you know, there's always a reason to shop local. These are very, very good merchants and good businesses. So thank you, Beckway Doors. You did a great job. And I'm sure other people will have things to talk about tonight, but I do want to put a plug in for our downtown trick or treat coming up. And of course, you know, the great, great event is the pup parade. Everybody loves the pup parade. So make sure that you get your furry ones in a new costume this year. I know a couple of the judges that are going to be there, but it will be a great, great time. So please enjoy South Lyon. We get about 3,000 kids attending that event, on that trick-or-treat event downtown. So that's another big, huge event that follows Pumpkin Fest. Just a great event. So move into South Lyon and enjoy a great lifestyle and a lot of fun events for your family. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Kivel.
Just want to make sure that everybody's researching as much as they can for the upcoming election. It's important. You need to end up playing, and please make the right choices. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Dilg.
I'm all set tonight. I don't have anything tonight.
Thank you. Councilmember Mosier.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank everybody that attended Pumpkin Fest. The weather was not real cooperative, but it didn't seem to deter people from coming downtown, and it was still pretty successful. So we have the Holiday Spectacular coming up, the tree lighting at Heineman, all sorts of things. We're going to need volunteers, so get your resumes ready and get ready to go on the sign-up genius. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to apologize for missing the last council meeting. Unexpectedly, I was called up for dad duties. One of South Lyon's newest residents and my family's son arrived several days early. So on Monday morning, September 23rd, at 5:23 a.m., Riker Mark Arau Hansen was born at nearly 8 pounds. He's healthy and keeping me up at all hours of the night. Regarding Pumpkin Fest, I did want to give a shout out. After Pumpkin Fest was over and the parade had gone through on that Saturday, I grabbed some coffee at Bigby, and I'm walking out the door and ran into Councilmember Kivel and his wife picking up trash. So I wanted to thank him and put that on the record for helping out to clean up some of the leftover candy and wrappers that had been left over from the parade. So thank you. With me having missed the last council meeting, I did want to mention that in mid-September, our city manager and I met with the director and several members of the Huron River Watershed Council. We reviewed our new partnership and the benefits that the Huron River Watershed Council can give the city. Some of those benefits include water quality monitoring education, promoting and coordinating studies regarding water resources, preparing periodic reports concerning emerging issues with the Huron River watershed, providing specific information to the public regarding the Huron River, its lakes, streams, floodplains, wetlands, and groundwater, and research conducted by the council. Also, the council can distribute a quarterly newsletter on water resources, which we hope to have available at City Hall for residents. The council will also be able to conduct presentations, workshops, hands-on educational programs on the Huron River and its ecosystem. Additionally, it should be able to provide technical assistance to us on data and reports regarding water resources, provide permit and developmental proposals, review and assessments of some of the potential impacts to surface and groundwater resources in our city. And also, there will be some help that they can provide regarding regional, state, and federal representation to provide member governments with a forum for resolution of intergovernmental disputes, also to provide regional representation by serving on committees, and comment upon state and federal legislation. So, in addition to that, South Lyon will also need representation on the Huron River Watershed Council Board of Directors so that our city has a voice. And if my fellow council members would like, I would be happy to represent the city in this capacity for the first appointment if no one else is interested. Last week, I did have a great conversation with the city manager of Sault Ste. Marie regarding the municipal energy audits that his city had actually done. Now, the municipal audits, I was always under the understanding that the municipal audit would be all-encompassing of all city structures, but based on that conversation that I had with him, he commented that we are able to actually choose which buildings we would like to have audited so that we can take the most benefit from that analysis. So I did forward the audits to each member of the council and to the city manager to kind of review and take a look and see how big of a deep dive these sorts of audits actually are. Now, the audits were performed on 3 of their city municipal buildings and then shows what reports we can have for our city done. And this was just one of the contractors that they hired. So my hope would be that we can have a discussion in the near future and decide as a council how to proceed and take advantage of grants so that the city isn't using city funds for these sorts of reports. But I think it would be definitely something that the city should take a look at and explore in the near future. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, council member, and happy birthday, council member.
Oh, thank you. Thanks.
Councilmember Bogert.
Thank you. Kensington Valley Civitan Club will be hosting its annual Desert Angels packing party in November. The club is currently looking for donations of non-perishable items that will be packed and sent as care packages to service people overseas. Information about the future event is available on their website, which is KVCivitan, CIVITAN.org, or on their Facebook page. Thank you.
Thank you, council member. The only thing I have this evening is, don't forget the final 2 Saturdays for this year's Farmers Market, which will end on October 26th. It runs from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. Also, watch for an upcoming announcement as the Farmers Market will move indoors to the South Lyon VFW Hall starting in late November for the winter. And normally, we'd look for a motion to adjourn, but this evening, we're looking for a motion and a second to go into closed session. Councilmember Kurtzwell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to go into a closed session pursuant to Section 8A of the Open Meetings Act, MCL 15.268, at the request of the city manager to conduct a performance review.
I'll second.
I have a motion from Councilmember Kurtzwell, second from Councilmember Mosier. Do we have any discussion? City Clerk Deaton, if you'll lead us in a roll call on that one.
Bogert,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
Dilg,
Yes.
Mosier,
Yes.
Kibble,
Yes.
Kurzweil,
Yes.
Kennedy.
Yes. Thank you very much. We're going to stop recording at this point. We will go back on the record following the meeting should any decisions be made, and we'll ask everybody else who's not involved to exit the auditorium.